Have you ever noticed that in some families, the person who finally tells the truth gets treated worse than the person who actually caused the problem? Someone lies, someone explodes, someone manipulates, someone drinks too much, someone says something cruel. Someone repeatedly crosses boundaries, and everybody somehow learns to live around it. But then one person finally says, hey, this isn't okay, and suddenly that person is the problem. They're divisive. They're dramatic. They're unforgiving. They're destroying the family. They're making everyone uncomfortable. And if you've ever experienced this, you may have wondered, how in the world did I become the bad guy simply because I said out loud what everybody already knows? Well, there's actually a reason that this happens. And once you understand it, dysfunctional family systems start making a whole lot more sense. Hi guys, my name is John LaFront, and on this channel we talk a lot here about boundaries, difficult family relationships, reconciliation, faith, and what healthy relationships actually look like. And recently I made a video using the story of the Emperor's New Clothes to explain something that happens in dysfunctional families. Everybody can see the Emperor is naked, but everybody participates in the illusion because acknowledging reality, well, it comes with a cost. And I want to take that idea one step further today, because there's something fascinating about that story. The child who finally says, but he isn't wearing any clothes, didn't create the problem. He didn't undress the emperor. He didn't deceive the town. He didn't convince everybody to participate in the lie. He simply described reality. And yet, in dysfunctional systems, that person is often the one who becomes dangerous. So why is that? Because dysfunctional systems don't necessarily organize themselves around truth. They organize themselves around stability. And those are not always the same thing. Now, I want you to imagine a family where dad has a terrible temper. Everybody knows it. But over time, the family adapts. Mom learns which subjects not to bring up. The kids learn when to disappear into their rooms. Everybody knows not to challenge dad when he's upset. Maybe after an explosion, everybody acts normal again. Nobody talks about what happened. Eventually, the family develops an entire operating system around one person's behavior. And here's what's interesting. From the outside, you might look at that and say, well, dad's anger is destabilizing the family. But inside the family system, something different can happen. Dad's anger becomes predictable. Everybody knows the rules. Don't challenge him. Don't bring up certain things. Keep him happy. Move on quickly after an explosion. And that becomes the family's version of stability. It isn't healthy, but it's familiar. And human beings can become remarkably attached to familiar dysfunction. Now, I want you to imagine one of those kids grows up. They go to therapy, or get married, or they have children of their own, or simply spend enough time outside the family that they begin realizing, wait a second, other families don't operate like this? Maybe screaming at people isn't normal. Maybe guilt isn't actually love. Maybe forgiveness doesn't mean pretending something didn't happen. Maybe being family doesn't entitle someone to unlimited access to me. And then they do something incredibly disruptive. They stop following the old rules. Dad explodes, and instead of sitting there, they say, I'm happy to have this conversation when we're both calm, but I'm not going to stay while I'm being yelled at. And they leave. From their perspective, that's a boundary. But from the family's perspective, the system just experienced an absolute earthquake because one of the pieces stopped moving the way it always moved. There's a concept in family systems theory called homeostasis. It's basically the tendency of a system to maintain its existing equilibrium. And equilibrium does not necessarily mean healthy. It just means familiar and stable. I want you to think about a thermostat. If the temperature changes, the system kicks on and tries to bring the room back to where it was. Families can do something remarkably similar. When one person changes, the system often applies pressure to get that person to return to their old role. So, you set a boundary, and suddenly mom calls. Why are you doing this? Your siblings start to text. You're breaking mom's heart. Dad says, after everything we've done for you. Someone tells you, you've changed. And they may be absolutely right. You have changed. That's the problem. The old system depended on the old version of you. And this is where the truth teller becomes dangerous, because you're no longer merely refusing to participate. Your refusal exposes the fact that participation was optional. Now think about that. If everybody has spent 20 years saying, well, that's just how dad is, and you finally say, okay, but I don't have to be yelled at. You just introduced a very terrifying idea. Maybe none of us do. That's why one person's boundary can feel threatening to an entire dysfunctional system. You didn't simply change your behavior. You challenged the story that made everybody else's behavior make sense. And sometimes the system would rather discredit you than reconsider the story. So instead of asking, why does she feel like she needs this boundary? They ask, what happened to her? Instead of, did we hurt him? It becomes, why is he so sensitive? Instead of, is there something we need to repair? It's, his therapist has poisoned him against us. Or, his spouse changed him. Or, he thinks he's better than everybody. Now, do you see what happened? The conversation moved away from the original behavior and onto the person who noticed it. This is one of the ways scapegoating can develop. A family has enormous amounts of tension, pain, resentment, or dysfunction. But dealing with the actual sources of that tension would require uncomfortable change. So the tension gets concentrated onto one person. If only John would come to Christmas. If only Sarah would forgive her mother. If only Michael would stop bringing up the past. If only Rebecca hadn't set that boundary. Then everything would be fine. Except everything wasn't fine before Rebecca set the boundary. That's why Rebecca set the boundary. The boundary didn't create the fracture. It revealed it. And I think that that's an incredibly important distinction. Now, imagine there's a fire alarm going off in your house. And instead of looking for smoke, everybody gets furious at the alarm. Would somebody please shut that thing off? It's loud, it's annoying, it's disrupting dinner. The neighbors might hear it. We were having such a nice evening until this stupid alarm started making noise. So someone rips it off the wall. Finally, peace. Except the house is still on fire. That's what dysfunctional systems sometimes do with truth tellers. They confuse the person identifying the problem with the problem itself. Silencing the alarm feels like peace because the noise stopped. But silence and peace are not the same thing, and neither are harmony and health. Now, I want to add something really important here. Calling yourself the truth teller does not automatically make you right. All of us, and I mean all of us, have blind spots. All of us can misunderstand situations. All of us can remember things incorrectly. You can set a boundary badly. You can communicate poorly. You can hurt people while trying to protect yourself. Healthy boundaries require humility too. So the goal isn't, I see everything perfectly and my family is dysfunctional. The goal is being willing to ask, can we talk honestly about what happened? Can we consider the possibility that more than one perspective exists? Can we take responsibility for our own behavior? Can you tell me that I hurt you without me immediately building a legal defense for why I shouldn't have to hear it? That willingness is one of the biggest differences between healthy and unhealthy relationships. Healthy people don't have to agree with every accusation, but they can remain curious. Because healthy relationships have something dysfunctional systems often struggle with, and that is repair. Not perfection, repair. You hurt me. I tell you, you listen. Maybe you explain your perspective. Maybe I realize I misunderstood part of it. Maybe you realize that you crossed a line. We apologize. Behavior changes. Trust slowly rebuilds. That's a relationship. But if every attempt to discuss hurt is interpreted as an attack, well, repair becomes nearly impossible. And eventually, people stop trying. This is one of the reasons that I wrote the book Christ-like Boundaries, because I kept encountering people who genuinely wanted to be loving and forgiving and compassionate Christians, but had somehow learned that being Christ-like meant never acknowledging harmful behavior. And I don't believe those are the same thing. Jesus taught forgiveness. He also taught truth. He taught mercy. He also confronted harmful behavior. He loved people deeply, but he did not give every person identical access to him. Love does not require pretending. Forgiveness does not require rewriting history. And peace does not require sacrificing truth. Sometimes the most loving thing that you can do for a relationship is stop participating in the pattern that's destroying it. So if you've ever found yourself becoming the problem after you finally started acknowledging the problem, don't automatically assume that that means you're right. Stay humble, stay curious, examine yourself, of course. Listen when people give you legitimate feedback. But don't assume that their discomfort automatically means that you're wrong either. Sometimes people are uncomfortable because you're cruel. And sometimes people are uncomfortable because an old system is being challenged. Learn the difference. Because you are not responsible for maintaining dysfunction simply because dysfunction has become familiar. And you don't have to attack the emperor, right? You don't have to humiliate anybody. You don't have to convince the entire town. Sometimes you simply stop applauding the clothes and tell the truth about what you see. If this video helped you understand something you've experienced, I invite you to subscribe to our channel. We're going to keep unpacking dysfunctional family systems, boundaries, forgiveness, reconciliation, and what healthy relationships can actually look like. And if you're trying to navigate these questions through a Christian lens, my book Christ-like Boundaries goes much deeper into exactly that. I'll see you on the next video.